Thank you very much, Professor Rao Sahab. You have presented a very historical development of Sanskrit Buddhist literature, that how our illustrious 7 teachers of Nalanda, who propagated or transmitted the Sanskrit Buddhist literature in Tibet and other China and other countries also. And also we have seen that, also we have observed that how these Sanskrit texts were developed in other parts of the globe also, and how Rahul Sankrityan, Professor Vijay Kumar Jain has also given a very overview that how Rahul Sankrityan has brought some of the manuscripts of Pramanavartik, Praman Samuchaya and other Sanskrit texts. And we are quite aware that how these Sanskrit texts which are available in Tibetan or Chinese language, how they are being translated into now our Devanagari script as well as in Sanskrit language. So thank you very much, Professor Rao Sahab. And now it is my turn to present my paper. So now I am going to present my paper on Pali Nissaya literature. I am going to give a historical development of Pali Nissaya literature. People might not be aware of that what is the Pali Nissaya literature. But in a very brief lecture, I am going to present that how our Buddhist thoughts, which were transmitted at the time of Third Buddhist Council to the different parts of the world, and how the teachings of the Buddha were transmitted to different countries, and how the different countries have adopted Buddhism and the traditions, customs, and their language, how they have assimilated Buddhism in their own different countries. So Pali, as we know that Pali is the language in which the teachings of the Buddha have been compiled. So in this brief presentation, I am going to present that what do you mean by Pali Nissaya literature? What are the definitions of the Pali literatures? What are the sources of Pali literature? I am just going to discuss that what are the thoughts which are coming to Pali Nissaya literature. As well as we are going to also discuss that how this Nissayas are a result of a long period of experimentation to develop superior pedagogical techniques of the teachings of the Buddha. Again, that whether the main focus I am going to present that whether Nissayas or the Pali Nissaya literatures were composed in Thailand or Laos or other countries, to understand the technical terms of Pali grammar. That is the main theme. And the next, that whether Abhidhamma Nissaya literature were composed to explain the Abhidhamma literature or not, or mainly you can say grammar with the help of the grammar. So this is a brief presentation. So first of all, I am going to discuss that what is Pali Nissaya literature. The literal the literal meaning of Nissaya is a Adhar, base or support. As we know that Nissaya is made up of 2 words, Ni and Saya. Ni is a upasagga, which gives in the sense of and whenever Ni is added with any dhātu or verb, it means that something is forcibly taken away in the case of the food ahar or upahar or something like that. I am not going to quote that Sanskrit, that how dhātu balvarth arthena, it has been taken in the sense of upahar or bihar or something like that. So here the main term is the saya. Saya means that which leans on. The literal meaning of Saya, and Sayati also that which slips, but here it is in the sense of Sayati, that is the Saya, that the literatures which are leaning on the Pali text, this is called as Nissaya. Nissaya literature are those literatures which are vernacular compositions composed by our venerable monks and the teachers of the monastery for the sake of understanding the Pali text to his fellow monks staying in the monastery. So that was the main thing actually is developed in Thailand and the Laos and in some of the parts of the Myanmar also. This Nissaya literature was developed, especially in the 15th century and the 16th century. We are having that how the Nissaya literature were composed by our venerable monks staying in this monastery for the sake of the newly ordained monks who were admitted in the monasteries or viharas to go through the teachings of the Buddha, the Tipitaka, and how they can understand the technical terms of the teachings of the Buddha available in Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. So that was the main and the technical terms how they have been defined. This is the main thing which have been defined. And Oscar on Hinever, he has defined that Nissaya literatures are those literatures which are mainly lean on the Pali text. So especially the literature which are discussing the technical terms of the Pali text, they have been composed in vernacular languages of the countries Laos or the Thailand. So I am going to give a very brief description of all these literature in a very brief manner and what are the techniques, pedagogical techniques to compose and define the technical terms of our Pali text. I will give you some of the examples in the end also. In a very brief manner, that Pali Nissaya literature is that type of collections of the peculiar vernacular notes composed and used by our venerable Buddhist monks in northern Thailand as well as in Laos in between the 16th century and the early 20th century. We are quite aware of Pitak literature, canonical literature, Anupitak literature, Atkatha literature, Niti literature, narrative literatures, Vans literatures. But we are aware of Nissaya literatures. So I will give you very brief that how our Buddhist manner, it differs from the commentarial acharyas and how they differ from the Pitaka as well as Anupitaka and commentarial literatures, and what was the main object of the our Nissaya literature in composing, and what was the main purpose of that newly ordained monks in the monastery. How can they understand the teachings of the Buddha? How can they be able to go through the Pali text without the support of the other things? So here Nissaya means supports. That is the Adhar or base. Those technical terms which have been defined by our acharyas in the monastery, they became the supports or the you can say Nissaya, as well as they became the Adhar for understanding the teachings of the Buddha in our Pali, in the monastery of the Laos, or as well as in Thailand also. And it is the development of 15th century to 20th century. Still, some of the texts are still composing, and they are defining the technical terms. They are not translating, but they are defining the technical terms and how they are etymologically, you can say, interpreted by our venerable monks in the monastery. So I will give you in a very brief manner. So Nissayas are not conducive to reading or as a connective narrative. It does not give a narrative literature. That how in the Jatakas we are having the narrative literatures, but here they are defining the technical terms, and they are also interspersed with the Pali words because of their definitions and the short explanations with their great grammatical notes also. So it is quite interesting that how Abhidhamma text as well as the grammar text, they have been also used in defining the our technical terms. So we have discussed that how in the beginning of the 15th century, there was a group of monks staying in the monastery of the Thailand. They used to translate Pali text in their local vernacular languages using a variety of scripts. In Thailand, we are having Lanna scripts and other scripts also. There are so many scripts, and we are having so many texts which are more than 800 texts which are available composed in the Lanna scripts and other scripts of the, and scholars are still working on the scripts as well as the manuscripts of their, and how the Indian scholars, they have also developed their interest to go through those Nissaya literatures. I will give you some of the examples. So generally, Nissaya text consists of Pali words and the phrases followed by vernacular translations, usually with numerous commentarial additions. Sometimes the acharyas of the monastery, they give the references from the commentary of the respective text also, but they interpret in their local vernacular languages with additions of the translators by venerable monks also. So many Nissaya texts were based on the canonical Buddhist scriptures, mainly the Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. One of the great scholar of the Thailand, who has done researches on our Pali manuscripts available in Thailand as well as Laos also, Justin McDaniel. He is the opinion of that these vernacular texts, namely Nissaya Pali literatures, either drew directly from the Pali canon, that is the Vinaya Sutta and Abhidhamma, and its commentaries, or created new texts themselves, and defining or interpreting in their own words, in their vernacular languages. They developed their own languages, but the scripts are different than the our Thai script or in others. We are quite aware that how in the 15th century there was a text Panyas Jataka, which was composed in Thailand in the 15th century, and it has only collections of the 50 Jatakas. And these 50 Jatakas are not available in our 550 Jatakas of Uttak Nikaya of Sutta Pitaka. They are quite different. The names are also not tallied with the Panyas Jataka. It is quite interesting that in Myanmar, we are also having a Jatak named as Jimme Panyas Jatak or Chingamai Panyas Jatak. So it may be that the Panyas Jatak, which was composed in Thailand, it was also translated into Myanmar, and the northern part of the Thailand, which is known as Chiang Mai, from where this Panyas Jatak was composed, and it is known as Chingmai Panyasa. In Burmese language, it is called as Jimme Panyasa. And it is suggested that it was introduced in Burma from Chingmai. Although we are not having any manuscripts that what was the source of the composition of this Jimme Panyas in Myanmar. But we are aware that Professor Padmanabh S. Jaini, who deciphered this Panyas Jataka, and he published it in Pali Text Society, London, 1981. And it is a collection of only 50 Jatakas. And I have told you that these 50 Jatakas are not available in our 550 collections of Jatakas available in Khudak Nikaya. What are the sources of this Panyas Jatak? We are not aware of that. And this Panyas Jatak collections, they are also, there are three variations of this Panyas Jataka, as Professor Padmanabh S. Jaini has discussed, that one version is available in Pagan, one in Sukhothai, and one in Chigmai. So there are three versions of the Panyas Jataka, and we are not aware that when and where the first collections to bear this title was compiled or unknown. So it is a very challenge for the Pali scholars also, that how in the 15th century these collections were developed. There might be that in Thailand these 50 Jatakas have developed out of our 550 collections of our Jatakas. There is a French scholar named as Elfier, who first of all drew the attention of this Panyas Jataka. And he says that these Pali narrative tales entitled Panyas Jataka, and he recognized as being a compilation of Pali narrative literatures. These are the narrative literatures, but the sources are not available in our Pali canonical text, namely Jatakas. So this is what was the main source of our sources. We are not aware of that. Again, that Elfier reported that there were at least three recensions of that. One is also available in Cambodia, one in Siam, and one in Burma. So J. Finot, he is also very good scholar on Thai Buddhism. He also prepared a concordance of these titles of the Panyas Jatakas, which are included in Panyas Jataka, and discovered that these collections are the recensions claimed only 50 stories, each not at all stories are identical. And these are not identical with any our 550 Jatakas. In Thailand also, besides the Panyas Jatak, we are also having Dhammapad Athikatha vernacular stories like Madhuras Champu, or the ritual text like Satparita, Kamma Vacha text are also there. And these are some of the examples of the Nissaya Pali text, through which we can see the evolution of the Pali and the vernacular. And we can also see the relations between the canonical and the vernacular, our Pali text. And we can also observe that how local Buddhist literature, as it was processed as a dynamic feature there, reflecting strong ties with our past, that is the canonical, that is the Sutta, Vinaya, and Abhidhamma, and how they are also showing the present, you can say, their stories. So besides this Panyas Jatakaj or Jatakaj narratives, there are so many ritual texts also, namely Satparita and others. They are being chanted on the auspicious occasion in Thailand. We are also having some Nissaya manuscripts which are drawn from Abhidhamma, probably for the purpose of teaching Pali grammar. Now I am coming to that how these Pali texts were composed or they were, you can say, interpreted by our acharyas staying in the monasteries of Thailand for the sake of understanding the technical terms. And they have taken the help of our Pali grammars. With the help of the Pali grammar, they have interpreted the technical terms. We are having one text, Atkatha Matika Nissaya or Nissaya, which is a partially translation of the Matika of Dhammasangani. As we know that Dhammasangani is the first text of Abhidhamma Pitaka, which is also called as a basic text or Mul Pakarana of Abhidhamma Pitaka. So there are 4 chapters of Dhammasangani, and before the 4th chapter, there is a establishment of the Matikas. Matikas are those angles or points or vision through which the teachings of the Buddha have been developed. So there are 100 Dukmatikas, 22 Tikmatikas, 100 Dukmatikas, altogether 122 Abhidhammamatikas and 42 Sutantamatikas. So there is a establishment of, first of all, 122 Tikmatika and Dukmatikas and 42 Sutantamatika. So here in Atkatha Matika Nissaya, first of all, the Venerable teacher has discussed about the Matikas, and he has interpreted that how the Tikmatikas, if you understand it very properly, then you can understand the other text of Abhidhamma Pitaka, namely Vibhanga, Dhātu Katha, Puggal Payati, Kathavatu, Yamakana Patthana. So this Atkatha Matika Nissaya is not simply a vernacular sub-commentary or a straightforward translation of the Athsalini Ath-yojana. And we are quite aware that on Dhammasangani, the first book of Abhidhamma Pitaka, there is a commentary written by Acharya Buddha Ghosa, Athsalini, in which the technical terms have been defined by Acharya Buddha Ghosa. Again, in Thailand, in the 14th century, by Venerable Yarnikitty, there is another commentary which was written on Athsalini, named as Athsalini Ath-yojana, which has been published by Sampurna Sanskrit University and edited by our Professor late Ram Shankar Tripathi ji. So in Athsalini Ath-yojana, he has also discussed some of the technical terms which have not interpreted in Athsalini itself. So Atkatha Matika also takes the help of the Athsalini as well as Athsalini Ath-yojana, and he interprets the Acharya in a very different way. And he gives a very overview of the Matikas also. Not all the 22 Tikmatikas or 100 Dukmatikas, but he has taken some of the, you can say, Matikas, and he has taken the help of the grammatical. I will give you 1 or 2 examples that how he has interpreted the things. The main purpose of the Yarnikitty of Athsalini Ath-yojana to interpret the technical terms which are not available in Athsalini, but in Atkatha Matika Nissaya, it was only to identify grammatical compounds in the Dhammasangani. That how this Vipaka or Vipaka Dhamma or Vipaka Dhamma, how this is the Kammadhara or Bahubirhi, and how the Vipak has come, what is the etymological derivation of the Vipaka. In the Atkatha Matika Nissaya, the composer has given a very detailed manner explanation of that term. We see that Atasalni and Dhammasangani are not specifically grammatical texts. These are not the grammatical texts, even in Atasalni or Atasalni, Atayojana. But the Nissaya uses this text as a matrix or the matika on which the grammatical lessons are based. Now, the Acharya has given the grammatical lessons on these matikas itself to understand the newly ordained monks, that how they can be able to go through the text by themselves, not by the other teachers, by understanding the technical terms which have been given with the help of the grammatical sutras, they can understand the text of the Dhammasangani or Attasalani. So these lessons are important to teach the audience how to identify the terms, technical terms. These lessons are important to teach in the sense that newly ordained sense they can be aware of all the tikmatikas, and they have given in a very repetitive style also. And we are also aware that not in India, but in Thailand, especially in Myanmar also, the Matikas of the Dhammasangani has played a very important role in the history of Buddhism for understanding the teachings of the Buddha, or how the Buddhist thoughts have been developed in, especially in Thailand, Myanmar, or Sri Lanka. We see that there is a great role of Matikas, 22 Matikas, 100 Matikas, and 42 Sutanta Matikas. These Matikas are formed for the basis of the definitions and the development of Paramattha Dhammas in the remaining books of the Abhidhamma Pitaka. Especially in the Khepakanda of, which is the third chapter of Dhamma Sangani, if you go through that, first of all, there is a description of the Kusalatik, Katme Dhamma Kusala, Katme Dhamma Kusala, Katme Dhamma Apyakata. The first Tikmatika, that is the first question, Katme Dhamma Kusala, that how many are the Dhammas or states which are called as moral or Kusala. Then it has been said that Ini Kusal Mulani, Alobho, Adoso, Amoho, Tam Sampayuto, Vedana Kando, Sanya Kando, Sankar Kando, Biyana Kando, Tam Samuthanam, Kai Kammam, Bashikammam, Manukamma, Kammam, Ime Dhamma Kusala. Now here the Acharya, in the Atkatha Matika Nissaya, he discusses about the term of the Kusala, which has been already interpreted by in Attasalini as well as in Attasalini Athayojana. But here in Acharya, they are giving in a very different manner, so that any newly ordained monk can understand by themselves, by himself, to text. So these terms generally refer to the states of the consciousness, and throughout the text of Abhidhamma Pitaka, we see that how the poor Paramattha Dhammas have been discussed. So the main purpose of the Nissaya literature is emphasizing the terms in the Matika to repetitions rather than translation. These are not the translations, but they are repeated in so manners so that the monks can memorize it in their mind. And since they are the technical terms, they can be memorized by themselves. There is another text which has been written on such a Sankhepa. We are also aware that there are 9 manuals of Abhidhamma, like Abhidhamma Avatar, Paramath Vinichay, such a Sankhepa, or Namachar, Deepak, Nam Rupa Paricheda, and others. There are 9 manuals which have been written on Abhidhamma, and there is one text which is called as such a Sankhepa written by Chol Dhammapala. So there is another Nissaya text named as such a Sankhepa Nissaya. It is mainly on grammatical text, and it is the few of the Nissaya literature which follows its source text. And in such a Sankhep Nissaya, here we find that the Acharya has taken the help of the such a Sankhep text. But in other texts, we are not finding any source of the text that what was the main text in that Katha Matika Nissaya. Some of the technical terms we are finding and correlating with the Attasalini and Attasalini Athayojana, but some of the technical terms are not we are traceable that what are the main sources of that. Justin McDaniel is of is of the opinion that Nissay used for the instruction of the Pali grammar or the translation of the Pali grammar text. So here see that how the Abhidhamma text were used for teaching the Pali grammar text. And largely these Pali grammar texts are found in Laos also. But few of them are also available in Myanmar and our Thailand also. But most of these texts, Pali grammar, which are helpful for understanding the Abhidhamma text, they are available in Laos. Further, it is said that narratives and the ritual text tend to be most prevalent, and there are occasionally Nissaya text on the abbreviated Pali verses or Pali Matikas from the Abhidhamma, whether it is Tik Matika or Abhidhamma Matika. Moreover, two manuscripts with the same title which have been copied around the same time and are often completely very different. It is interesting to note that these narratives are ethical, grammatical, and ritual translations, and they cannot be read as a canonical text. So these texts which have been composed, they cannot be read as a connected text. Whatever it has been said in the Attasalini or Dhammasangani, they cannot be connected with the Attakatha Matika Nissaya, or such a Sankhep Nissaya is not related with any way or connected text with the such a Sankhep Nissaya also. So, but these translations encompass many of the services most commonly associated with our commentaries, because the acharyas who have gone through the commentary text based upon the commentarial traditions, they have also interpreted their some of the technical terms of the canonical text. So repetitive styles of the commentaries, even in the canonical text, like in Dhammasangani or Vibhanga, we see the repetitive styles of the teachings of the Buddha. In commentary also, we are also having the repetition styles. In the Sutta also, in the Payal, we are having so many repetitions also. Here also, we are also having in Nissaya text, repetitions of the same terms so many times. The main purpose of the repetition is that how the newly ordained monks, if they repeat the technical terms as many times, they can remember, memorize the technical terms. Again, I am giving you just one example that how the term kusala has been defined. In Dhammasangani, we have seen that Katme Dhamma Kusala or Katme Dhamma Kusala, Katme Dhamma Vyakata. When in the Attasali, Acharya Buddha Ghosa, that when he is going to discuss the term Kusala, Kusalayanti, Salayanti, Ti Kusalam. And again, in the Attasali Athayojana, it has been said that those who kuchita akarena saintanam papakanam akusalanam dhammanam lunati eti kusalam. That kusal are those moral dhammas which are lying on the surface of the mind, and they cut the moral dhammas. So again, but in the Katha Matika Nissaya, how it has been defined, I am just giving you one example, that here vaparo nayo ye akusala kuchitena akarena sabhavena sayanti pavattanti iti akusala kusa kubbati saye. So now how it has been defined that the word akusal is formulated from ku. So again, the acharyas of the monastery of the Thailand, how they have interpreted it. Suppose there is a term kusala, kusala. Ku is the kuchita akarena, sa, that is the sayantanam, sayanti, kuchita akarena, sayantanam, lunati, la, that is the lunati, here that which cuts the immoral dhammas. So in that way, that ku as a first member with the root si or saye in the sense of saye, it has been defined for understanding the technical terms to the in newly ordained monks. So these passages in the Atkatha Martika Nissaya, they are giving several methods of reading the term kusala and akusala. More systematic. Again, I will come to the next point that how the Abhidhamma technical terms have been defined with the help of our grammar, with the text of the grammars also. We'll
Milanji,
yes,
thank you very much. And now I think you have to conclude.
Yes, within 5 minutes, I will complete it within.
Yes.
Okay, just a minute. So
because
this,
we have to decide, we have to take break or continue. We must take break, I think.
yes, just within 5 minutes, I am going to complete it. So the main thing is that after listening and the reading of the passage, one can be able to know how to read the compound, since the translator explicitly defined it as a kammadhara. If you go through the each term, that is the vipak dhamma or vipak dhamma, and again, after reading the meaning of the vipaka, it says that vipachanin athena vipakam. And what is the vipak? That it is from the state of the infancy to the state of maturity. So in that way, it has been defined by the acharyas. And it is again said that this term may be understood by a person who is wise. Panditena viditabbo. So the translator or the interpreter has written on the Nissaya text like this. So this is the main thing. Now I'm coming to the last point, that how some vernacular translations left Pali words and the phrases from the source text. They do not simply provide vernacular glosses for the Pali words, but actually write the Pali words is seen clearly by focusing on what I is called. So there is a term always given in the Nissaya literature that there is a sense of I, and there is a reinforcement of the I there also. So certain Pali words are consistently glossed in Nissayas, even though their gloss must have been commonly known. So just for the sake of conclusion, I am just giving that some of the Nissayas have been written on the Pali text. They never existed prior to our Nissaya literature. These are even the Panyas Jatak, which are available, the Jatakas which are available there, they are not available in the 550 collections of our Jatakas of the Kutak Nikaya of Sutta Pitaka. But they have been developed as a you can say different manner, and they never existed before this story. So they are different pedagogical technique of interpreting the canonical as well as commentarial literature in a different manner. So the Nissaya Acharyas, they often have multiple and sustained linkages to the source text also, but that source text is either unidentified or almost completely divergent from any extant versions of the source text. in a very one sentence that Nissaya literature follows a known source text at points and then makes long detours away from the source. So thank you very much for having a patience hearing. I have taken some much more time.